Welcome to the presentation titled The New Economics of IT. Tyler McGraw will be presenting from Ingres. This room is sponsored by X-Mission, which is a ISP that I wish I could have up in Idaho. So we'd like to thank them for the support, and then also Tyler for preparing this presentation.
Thanks. I'm going to drive the cameraman a little busy because I like to walk and like to pace when I talk. My name's Tyler McGraw. I'm a senior consultant with Ingres Corporation. I'm a DBA by trade. I'm part of the North American Services Group, and my role is primarily to go out with customers, help them design and configure products and solutions, their solutions using our products inside of Ingres. For those of you who may not be familiar with Ingres, we've been around for about 30 plus years. In fact, I live in Provo, but back in the early 90s, I was a Ingres Users Group president here in Salt Lake City, and I saw a couple of friends today that I used to hang out with. You know, back then it was University of Utah, US West. I guess they became Quest or something like that, and a few other were big Ingres groups. It reminded me of my very first DBA job that I had. Just fresh out of school, and I cut my teeth on IBM RS-6000s. Anybody ever remember those boxes? It looked like a trash compactor, didn't it? You know, it's kind of sitting underneath the desk. And what was really cool about the RS-6000 was it had this key. I thought it was awesome. You know, a key you put into it and you turned it on and it ran, and you had this big yellow reset button. And so I'm a DBA, fresh out of school. I'm the guy in charge, and I invite my wife to come for lunch one day, and she brings my 2-year-old son with her. And I happen to be working some paperwork, and they walk into the computer room, and she sits down and sets my son down on the floor, and he walks right over to that RS-6000 and goes boink and pushes the reset button. And I'm diving over the desk to try and grab him, and he starts crying, and I start crying, and about that time my phone rings, and it's my boss. He says, Tyler, I think the network just crashed. And I said, oh yeah, it's a network problem. Let me get back to you on that. So the system did come back online, and Ingres recovered, and I did confess. I told my boss, I said, look, my son was in the computer room, and he pushed the reset button. He said, well, Tyler, it's probably not a good idea to have, kids under 5 years old in the computer room. There's a minimum height requirement to walk in there. But he was very understanding. Taught me a lesson, though. Taught me a very good lesson early on in my career. First of all, if there's a button to be pushed, somebody's going to push it. And secondly, all computer problems are network related until proved otherwise. So apologies to you guys, you network admins. Anyway, here's my agenda. Basically, I'll give you a quick primer on Ingres, what we've been up to in the last few years. A little bit about our company. Ingres is that rare company that's gone from a closed source vendor to an open source vendor, and some of the challenges that go along with that. Also want to talk about the new economics of IT. Basically, some things that we're seeing in our business as we go out and sell our products to the marketplace, and the challenges that our IT brethren face, and sisters, I guess, wherever we're going. It's a tricky time to be an IT professional, especially in a management position, trying to balance budgets and things like that. So we'll talk a little bit about some success that we're seeing as a company, and some trends on how we're seeing companies balance those budgets. And then we'll also talk a little bit about some innovation that we're seeing, some trends, and specifically around SaaS, appliances, and bundles. I'm a big bundles advocate. Love the idea of bundles and appliances, and very much are seeing success in our business by deploying technology in that form. And that's basically it. So a little bit about Ingres real quick. Ingres has been around, as I say, for about 30 plus years. We were one of the original relational database products out there. Started out in UC Berkeley as a PhD candidate's project. Michael Stonebreaker was part of that. And we've been part of bigger companies for most of our life. We've been acquired and reacquired. And then in about 2005, 2006, some investors got together. They approached CA, which is where we recently were part of, and said, hey, you've got this really cool database technology. Let's spin it out of CA and make it run as its own product. And that's what happened in about 2006. We were spun out of CA, At that point in time, they made the decision to turn the entire code line over to the GPL, release it all under a GPL license. And so at that point in time, from our inception in 2006, we've been an open source technology provider. We had about 10,000 customers around the world. Last year we did about $68 million. And it's a services, it's not licensing fees, it's a support contracts is how we sell our product and our services. Some of the companies that we work with, what was nice is that when we turned into an open source company, we had an instant user base, which worked out really well for us because we had already deployed out into enterprise class systems our product. And so it was a little bit easier transition for us to go into open source because we had a built-in user base that was used to calling us for support. And as things have gone forward, we're starting to get a little bit more recognized in the industry. Gartner recently did a study on the open source databases that are available. And they pretty much panned most of them when talking about would you run your business on it? Would you pay money to actually run your business on it? And the exception to that rule was Ingres. And the reason we were able to get their endorsement is that we're already doing that. We already have customers that run their business on top of Ingres. And so we had already proved to ourselves with those big wins. So that's basically Ingres. If you want to talk more Ingres, come grab me afterward. And happy to talk Ingres with you. Like I say, I'm a DBA by trade, so I'm thinking about joining the DBA users group. They'll have me. I want to talk about new economics of IT. And to do that, I want to just give you a quick rundown, a brief of where we started. Of course, Y2K, pre-Y2K, we were in that time of IT exuberance, wasn't it? I've been a consultant and a contractor my whole life, most of my career, and I made some of the best rates I ever made pre-Y2K. And it was a great time to be an IT professional. And what was awesome about it, it was this trifecta of really alignment of a real technical problem that could only be solved with a technical solution and a terrified user base, right? They were like, man, if I don't fix this problem, I'm not going to be able to make payroll. I'm not going to, my dogs and cats will start living together. It's going to be a horrible thing. So we entered this group of IT exuberance. A lot of money was spent. We talk about the IT.com bubble at that same time period. And those of us who were making those good rates, we knew that eventually things were going to come to a halt. And of course, 9/11 kind of burst that bubble a little bit prematurely. But we pretty much understood that we had seen the zenith as far as IT exuberance. And so what happened, as we hit about mid-2005, call it IT austerity. And I remember the company I was working with, the CFO at the time, he's put this big announcement of IT spending austerity measures. And I didn't know what that meant. I had to go look up austerity. And if you look at definition 3 or 4 down, it means forced economic revision or something to that effect. Basically pinching every penny. And suddenly I had to start going to the steering committee. And I started to have to get approvals for budgets and a return on investment. What do I care about return on investment? I'm a DBA. Those kinds of projects, and I see a few people nodding your heads. You probably had a similar situation. Those of us who were working in public companies had another little thing to deal with, Sarbanes-Oxley. Anybody know what Sarbanes-Oxley is? Oh, these 5 gray hairs right here are related to Sarbanes-Oxley. So those were some of the challenges, but we made some adjustments in 2005, and IT was able to cope. Nowadays, we're entering this phase that I'm calling IT atrophy, where we've got kind of a little bit of shriveling. And one thing that we need to understand about IT is it's typically referred to as a lagging indicator. You know what I mean by that, a lagging indicator? So as your business is doing well and your sales are up and you're gaining more market share, IT typically rises to meet the needs of the business, right? You spend more on computer systems, you buy more hardware, you hire more staff, etc. So we kind of lag behind the market just a little bit. Conversely, as business goes down, as we lose business, IT kind of stays up on that arc for a little while because we typically negotiate multi-year contracts, right? If we lease equipment, We roll over those lease payments 2 or 3 years. We may have service agreements that go for a couple of years. And so it's kind of a lagging indicator. Well, what's happening to us right now in the IT industry is that in the last couple of years, we've experienced a pretty unprecedented recession and loss of business. And as a result, IT has had some bright spots, but now we're starting that downhill slope inside of IT. And the net effect of this is basically budgetary pressure. I remember a couple of years ago, as we could kind of see some of these happening, these things on the horizon, companies immediately started restructuring their IT budget. Again, indicating, hey, if I've got to sign a multi-year deal, I need to sign this deal that what it's going to look like in 2010. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. Some of the CIOs and the IT managers that I've worked with, they basically only had a couple of options to balance these budgets. They've got their variable year-over-year costs and then their fixed costs. And a couple of years ago, what most everybody was doing was just canceling projects. That was the main thing. I had a couple of my projects that I had on the books that just got canceled. They said, hey, we're going to have to make do with this hardware. We're going to see if we can squeak it out another year or two. We're going to hold off on upgrading XYZ system until the market turns around a little bit. And that's how we basically coped. That's how many of the IT departments coped, is they just put off projects or pushed them back or narrowed their scope. Well, as things have kind of prolonged, they've had to cut staff. And this one hurts because I've got a lot of good friends who are very, very sharp people who are looking for jobs. And the challenge is that their projects are not there to keep them busy. And IT directors have said, well, I can't afford to have 4 DBAs. Anybody have 4 DBAs in their group now? Oracle DBA, SQL DBA, an Ingres DBA? Anybody got 4? If you do, it's a rarity. Now typically you got the Oracle DBA who also does MySQL, who may have a little SQL, or even worse, the sysadmin, the Windows admin guy, he also runs the SQL database, right? I mean, raise your hand if that's how it is in your organization. You're in charge, you just became a de facto DBA, right? So that's kind of the situation that we're in now. When it comes to fixed cost, though, is a little bit of a interesting thing there. And it has to do with data centers. What we're seeing is people are re-upping their data center contract. Anybody moved a data center recently? Anybody? One. Pretty expensive proposition, wasn't it? Pretty painful? Yeah. So to move that data center, they're kind of taking the approach of the devil you know. Rather than scrapping your own data center and moving it somewhere else, they've just said, hey, we're just going to bite the bullet. We're going to have to renew this contract. I remember I was working for a company in South Carolina a couple of years ago, and we were planning a data center move to Atlanta. And this was a big deal. I mean, you talk about a complex project with a lot of moving parts. A data center move is a big deal. And man, we were throwing everything we could at. We were decommissioning hardware, we're throwing some virtualization on. I went out and, these 50 Wildcat databases out here, I said, what is this database? Bowling scores. It's not production, it's going. And so we had to get rid of stuff like that. Got all our data center down to where our physical footprint was a lot smaller than where we were. Signed a contract, big contract, multi-6 figures over years. And started to move our hardware down to Atlanta. Well, somebody got as the engineers, I like to call the pocket protector squad, as they got a hold of all of our power requirements and we started getting ready to plug things in, an interesting thing happened. And a formula materialized, and you probably know the formula that I'm talking about. It was a very complex formula that measured the amount of amps you put in versus the BTU that comes out. So it's the amount of power requirement you draw versus how much heat you have to exhaust. And those numbers didn't match up. So we got that call that you just hate to get where they say, look, we'd love to accommodate you here in our data center, but we're going to have to mount a surcharge on top of what we quoted you we could house your equipment for because your HVAC requirements are so large. And so the whole deal got scrapped. They said, look, it's just not economically feasible for us. So an interesting kind of anomaly in this marketplace that we see right now is data centers. What they are doing is renegotiating contracts, but typically they're not decommissioning hardware and moving it somewhere else. And then the next thing that we're seeing is software costs are climbing and they're going up. In fact, software costs are up, ongoing maintenance costs are up pretty much across the board. And there's several reasons for that. As an example of it, I want to talk about Oracle. And I apologize to all you Oracle devotees. It's going to sound like I'm picking on you, but it's so easy. Great article came out a couple of weeks ago from Business Week, Customers Over a Barrel. And of course, with a title like that, it's not exactly Fox, O'Reilly, fair and balanced, is it? And we had a few of our customers quoted in this article. And basically, the nuts and bolts of it is that Oracle had gone out to their customer base and pushed through a price increase on their annual support costs. And customers were being forced, many of them were really violently opposed to it. You know, this is a shakedown. You're just grabbing more money out of me. But Oracle was able to push that through because they had little or no alternative to their systems. And I remember a couple of years ago as I was going around meeting with other CIOs and so forth talking about this, they said, Tyler, you're a nice guy and I like what you have to say, but I got an all-you-can-eat Oracle license. I got an all-you-can-eat SQL Server license. It's actually bundled with my Server 2005 license. Anybody ever had one of those? And no matter what I could say to a lot of these guys, they wouldn't believe that there was some sort of economic money to be had by looking at open source. Well, fast forward 3 years. Head of our company is Roger Burkhart. He's former Chief Technology Officer of New York Stock Exchange. He told us of a conversation he had with this banker, a large multinational bank, who had just gone through an Oracle audit. Anybody been through an Oracle audit recently? You probably wouldn't be in this building if you were. He called up Roger and he said, look, I just got my new bill from Oracle. It's $20 million. Big company, big multinational. It's $20 million. What can you do for me? Unfortunately, it's very difficult to migrate from that closed technology into an open source technology. Now, we have had customers do that, but that's not the most cost-effective way to use open source software. And apologies to those of you who are out selling open source. If you're trying to pitch migrations, that's a tough row to hoe. And as a result, they basically bit the bullet and wrote a check for $20 million. They're a bank, so hopefully it cleared. But the point is, they pushed that price increase through because they could. Very telling is Oracle's most recent report to Wall Street. First quarter, I guess their first quarter started in September. On the bottom there, the GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. New software license revenues were down 17%. That's people buying Oracle for the first time. New software purchase, new business, right? A new win. Software license updates and product support revenues were up 6% during that same time period. Now, what does that tell you? It tells you that people aren't buying it. They're covering the cost of that lost revenue on new acquisition with what? Service fees, support licensing costs. Up 6% in this economy in this quarter, and that's just one quarter. So, again, I apologize for picking on Oracle. It's just so easy to do. And, this is going to continue because that's the only way they can get growth into those organizations is pushing through price increase. Now, I'd like to say I was upset at Larry Ellison. Actually, he made my Christmas card list this year because my phone's ringing off the hook now. Suddenly, when you start adding that 6% to those Oracle licenses, my migration costs are starting to get a return on investment, right? Now, if you start factoring that 6% increase over 3 years, moving to another product is looking more and more appealing. And so here's what we're seeing a lot of customers do. they have these proprietary alternatives. And in the open source land, there's basically been just a couple of stacks. Now, I know there's lots of open source here. I'm a database guy, so I'm talking databases, right? In open source land, for databases, you pretty much have MySQL and Ingres. This is a development stack here, so you've got Oracle, Oracle BA, which is their app server. In my stack, I'm using JBoss. Eclipse, any Eclipse developers here? Eclipse, great tool, isn't it? Gosh, it's such a good tool. And it's open source too, and it's plug-in enabled, and I can customize it to work with, you know, there's an Ingres version of Eclipse that'll help you develop database applications. Native inside of Eclipse, it's awesome. That's kind of where you're at. Well, what just happened last year, was it last year? No, it was this year, wasn't it? Oracle announced the acquisition of Sun. Now, again, I apologize for being negative, but I haven't talked to one MySQL DBA who thinks this is a good thing. I'm happy to be proved wrong. I mean, I'm a MySQL user myself. I think it's a great database, but I haven't talked to any MySQL DBAs that think this is a good thing. And the reason is there's no motivation from Oracle's standpoint to push open source, is there? I mean, again, I'm happy to be proved wrong, and I hope I am wrong, but I can't see that organization that just pushed through a 6% increase on support costs really getting behind MySQL and pushing it out and rolling it out. Again, I'm happy to have that argument. Maybe we can have that argument afterward. I hope I'm wrong. Here's some examples. This is just a real world, these are published prices from Oracle. It's a 4x4 box, no, a 4x8 box. Oracle 10G and their BEA, which is their app server, Oracle Developer, their IDE, their little proprietary one. And this is their pricing. So over the course of about 3 years, it's about $2 million. I can provide that same and or similar stack for about 1/10 the cost. And this is our list pricing too. For that same 4 CPUs, an 8x8, you know, 8 cores, or 32 cores. We don't charge by core, we charge by socket. We don't get into that. And so the conversation that I'm having with a lot of the CIOs is, what is that, you know, so over time, it's basically I'm saving you about, you know, $1.8 million. What is that functionality that proprietary softwares has that's worth $1.8 million? What is it? What is it that I'm lacking? If open source is not going to meet your needs, what is it that's worth $1.8 million to you over 3 years? And there's some head scratching that takes place after that conversation. You know, are you willing to pay that amount of money for some feature that I don't have? And if that's true, if there is a feature that Oracle has that I can't do, great, you're going to have to pay it. But come on, we're talking databases, right? I mean, put a number in, hopefully you get the same number back out. Anyway, moving on. I know, again, I apologize to all you Oracle fans out there. I know somebody's there. So here's the exercise that we've been running with a lot of our context. First of all, as you look at your IT portfolio, on one side of the equation, you have that proprietary stuff that you're not going to be able to move. It's so unique, so customized to your business that you're not going to be able to migrate it to an open source solution. And then on the other side, you've got something that you shouldn't be having in-house anyway. You know, you've got those things that you really ought to farm out to somebody else. Like, I don't know, spam. Anybody think they can do spam protection better in-house than out-house? Out-house, that was a good one. You can do spam in-house cheaper and better than you can to somebody else? Yeah, and maybe you're the stud that can do it, right? But there's only one of you and 50 other companies. I'm not sure you can. I don't know if you can do firewall, IP tables, email cheaper in-house than you can with somebody else. Maybe. I mean, that's kind of outside my expertise, but when we start having these conversations with the IT managers, they're kind of scratching their head and saying, yeah, I don't know if I can do that cheaper than somebody else can do it. So they're moving those projects out to those SaaS providers. Somebody that can do it just as reliably and inexpensive. And then the sweet spot for open source is right here in the middle. And when I say open source, I'm not talking just open source, I'm talking open standards. There's a big difference, right? You can have a piece of open source software that only 15 guys in a cabin in Montana know how to make work. No offense to you people who are from Montana, but that's not real true open source, is it? I mean, if it takes those nerds in Montana in the cabin in the backwoods to make it run, it's kind of hard to adopt that across your enterprise. But if it's on open standards, uses the same kind of set standards that everybody else uses, chances are, you can roll it out to other places. That's what makes it so hard to migrate an Oracle installation. From the database layer, they have so many stored procedures and triggers and things that live down in the database, it's hard for me to come in with Ingres and say I can migrate that. Because it's proprietary, that's their method, that's how they do it. So it's hard for me to give you a good number when it comes time to migrate your system. Because I know it's expensive. Everybody's got to go look through that code. And really, those things should be up in job control anyway, in my way of thinking. So we start this exercise of existing systems. Things that are on the books right now. Things that have a life expectancy to them. Things that have a total cost of ownership that makes it sense to start looking for open source alternatives. And we move them to an open standards open source product. We'll talk a little more about that later. And then now, new projects. This is where we're seeing a lot of activity. What we found is all those projects that got put on hold a couple of years ago, well, suddenly, as the business is hopefully making a turn for the better, they need those projects now. They need them yesterday. Anybody have that kind of scenario happening right now? They need something in the business right now to be innovative, to be creative, to help the business survive and win new customers. And it was a project that got put off a couple of years ago. Now suddenly it's high visibility, high radar. Well, the challenge that IT markets have right now, or IT staff, is that we're so busy maintaining our existing systems to go out and meet this criteria is sometimes very difficult for us. And so it's time to go shopping on the open source marketplace. You're going to look for somebody who's faced that challenge before and has a product that's available that you can bring in-house and customize. So building the business case. It comes down to total cost of ownership versus pain level to migrate versus the transition to that new product. So if the TCO numbers match, if you have that open source product that matches, then you're good for your number one criteria is to save money. This is why Larry Ellison made my Christmas card list, because as he bumps that number up, it makes my migration number look a whole lot better to the customer. Second is the migration cost. Again, this is why it's so hard to win new business on migrations, at least for us in our company. You may have more success in your companies and your businesses because those migration costs are expensive and they're disruptive to the business. And they are less likely to take those projects on because they're fraught with challenges. And then the final is, will your business actually adopt the technology and use it, right? I mean, we're kind of technology consumers. We like technology. We like doing that. But if your business, if the John Q business user won't use the technology, it's a waste of time, waste of budget, waste of effort. All right. So here's some trends that we're seeing. First of all, the annual support license is resonating. Suddenly, we're putting the power back into the hands of the business owners. I have to prove to you every year that I'm worth the money you're going to spend with me. This is really how it should be, right? I mean, if all things were equal, this ought to be the king. If I don't prove my value to you year over year, don't use my product. Don't pay me support. Right now, you can go to the Ingres website, download our fully functional enterprise class database. It's got replication in it, online backup, all of the things that you expect in an enterprise database. Throw it into your environment, use it as much as you want. If you want my support, tell me how many CPUs you have it running on, I'll give you a number. And I earn your business year over year. If you don't think you're getting the value out of Ingres, don't pay for it. Replicator's not going to suddenly quit working because you don't type in my license code, right? Big trend there. Another thing we're seeing is companies are adopting solutions, not just products. And this was hard for me to get my head around initially. I thought, what do you mean a solution? You know, for right now, IT, at least the IT directors that I talk with, they're looking to plug a specific gap in their IT work, or they're going to use that technology to innovate, to provide new functionality. And so I've got to present them a complete solution that they can easily adopt and roll out across their enterprise. Gone are the days where I could pitch a 6-month proof of concept. Anybody done a 6-month proof of concept recently? Whew, dang it. Keep looking for one of those jobs. I just finished a project out in California, big university out there. From start to finish, I had 25 days. 25 days. Said, Tyler, if you can get this product done, if you can get it installed and configured in a month, less than a month, the business is yours. It actually took longer. You know, it only took me a couple hours to get everything installed and configured. It took me like a day and a half to actually migrate their data. You know, it took longer to migrate their data than it did to set up the application and install it and configure it. We were able to hit their numbers. Actually, we did such a good job that they kind of re-upped some of their license fees for an extra month with their other vendor and did a side-by-side comparison during that extra month time period. But from the customer standpoint, I had to have instant ROI. I had to have the ability to put it out and in place immediately, or else I wouldn't have got their business. And we see that repeated over and over with more people who want to adopt open source. You know, if it gets too technical, if it gets too hard to implement, they're not interested in your solution. You've got to be able to put it in place and make it work right out of the box. Which kind of leads me to my next thing. Services, services, services. I'm in the services group in North America, and we are the top salesmen in our company. Service engagements. The reason is that unfortunately our IT departments have been cut to the bone in many areas. They don't have the people, the time, or the personnel or expertise to put my solution in place. And because they don't have to pay that upfront license fee, they're spending it in services with me. So instead of that, you know, $250,000 Oracle 10G license, they're giving me XYZ amount of dollars to make sure they have success in their environment. So those of you who provide open source software or are open source software creators, you got to have a services department. You got to do service engagements. If not, if it takes in-house expertise to put your technology into their company, it's a much, much tougher sell. Much tougher sell to a company. At least we're finding that. So most of our engagements, most of our sales engagements include a services element. Built right in, includes a services element. Okay? Certifications. This is an area that's gaining traction. If you want people to consider your open source product or your solution, it's got to be certified. And what I mean by that is that certain configurations have to run in certain operating systems and in certain deployments. There's a VMware certification. There's a Zen server certification. There's a Ubuntu certification. You know, there's these certifications that mean something to potential customers. And so if you have an open source product that you can't certify to run in VMware, chances of its adoption gets reduced. That's not to say somebody's not going to run it, but it limits kind of how you're going to deploy that solution. And this is one thing that the market, like Forrester Research and Gartner, they're driving this really hard. They're saying, hey, yeah, you have this great piece of technology, but can you certify it to run on something that's enterprise class? So we're pursuing a lot of those certifications. And I definitely say if you are building open source solutions, or adopting open source products look for certifications. And then finally, be able to distribute in multiple ways. Gone are the days that you would just simply go out and requisition a piece of hardware, right? I don't know, does that exist anymore? Maybe. But the idea that you would go out and buy a new piece of software server, a new piece of hardware to run an interdepartmental database, that doesn't exist in my world anymore. Maybe it does in yours. But certainly they're looking for virtualized solutions, most of the customers I deal with. Or they're looking to put it on a commodity-based hardware. You know, let's stick it in a Dell box that lives over in the corner. And you as a provider of open source technology, your form factor's got to be able to accommodate that. Bare metal install, yes. VM, that, yeah. Can I obtain your technology with a SaaS deployment? Yes. Can I put it up into an Amazon EC3 cloud? Yes. And that's kind of where those certifications come into play. Finally, appliances and bundles. We've been a SUSE Studio user for about a month now, a little bit over a month, and I think it's a great product. And is the SUSE Studio guys in here? Maybe not. They're going to be doing a demonstration, and it's on your calendar. I would highly recommend you look at this technology. The reason is that we've found that people are willing to consume new technology as long as the hassle factor, you know what I mean by hassle factor, right? As long as the hassle factor is at a minimum. Especially with the time constraints that a lot of IT personnel have right now. You know, if I've got to download this component and make sure I get the latest patch, and I'm going to also grab Open Office and a copy of the Swift tools and, you know, all of those disparate things, and make sure that I've got Tomcat version 5, that's more complexity, right? Takes more time to have a successful engagement. And so appliances and bundles, I highly recommend. Now, you may not deploy a production system on an appliance. Maybe, you know, depending on your data load. Again, I'm a database guy, so I'm looking at how much hard drive space we're talking about, what's the data model look like. But your first exposure to your customers should be an appliance or a bundle, because you want them to have a good experience out of the box. When you go to ingres.com, you can download our bundles and our appliances right there. There's a live CD available, so you can just boot it up and run with it and see our bundles and appliances in action and have that good out-of-box experience. Then your next phone call is, hey, I'm interested in this salesperson, you know, what's it go for? Let's set up a conference call. And then they'll call me and say, let's do a demo. Tyler, show me a demo. Show me some of the capabilities of this product. That's never going to happen if they can't get past the install, right? I mean, we all have that hassle factor we're willing to live with. And we're technology people, so we have a little bit more of a hassle factor. You know, we like figuring out how to make, you know, this piece of random software run in our environment. But the technology adopters, that is the last thing they want to play around with. Okay? So again, I highly endorse SUSE Studio. I've actually built a few appliances myself, and am looking to build more of those and make those available for more people that want to have an experience with Ingres. You know, go to SUSE Studio, download the appliance. Let me give you a success story with our appliances. One of our business partners is Alfresco. Anybody ever heard of Alfresco? Alfresco Content Management. Great product. Open source. They've got a sales office here in town. It's basically open source version of Documentum for enterprise class document management. So we put an appliance together, and that appliance includes a Linux operating system. There's a slice of Java in there, a little piece of Hibernate in there as well. I've got Tomcat, Ingres 9, our database, and then the Alfresco stack on top of it. It's a Java application, so it runs on that stack. And what's great from a customer standpoint is I maintain the whole stack. As my boss likes to say, there's one throat to choke. Not sure if that's harassment or what, probably. At 2 o'clock in the morning and the system's gone pear-shaped, they make one phone call to Ingres Tech Support. And I fix Linux if I need to. If there's a patch that needs to be issued, part of this is OpenOffice for document conversion. Well, you know, there's patches being released all the time, right? And we test and make sure that it works inside of that stack, and then we'll distribute it to the customer base. You know, no fuss, no muss. Now, are you going to deploy it in an enterprise, across an enterprise with 10,000 users? Let me give you an example. Oh, sorry, one more about cost. Again, you know, this is our Mac Daddy thing. Anybody ever done a Documentum install? Anybody use Documentum? You don't get started for less than $250,000. It's just that kind of pricey software. And so we come in at way, way lower. And so again, the money they would have spent on licensing fees, they're spending with me in what? Service engagement. Yeah, they're spending money with me to implement it, because a document management system's tough to implement across an enterprise. You know, why is Microsoft making so much money with SharePoint? You push a button and you roll it out, right? I mean, that's at least the advertising. SharePoint users? Any SharePoint users here? Oh, right on. You guys are worth your weight in gold, aren't you? Know how to make that run. So let me give you a success story. We had a customer, everybody's familiar with Facebook. At least I think you are. We had a customer who got, Facebook has a Facebook fund. What's my time? 15 minutes, thank you. Facebook fund is gosh, what do you call it? A investment fund part of Facebook. It's Actel Partners manages it. And what you can do is pitch an idea to Facebook, and if your idea is selected, you get funding, and they'll help you build an application on top of the Facebook platform. So we had a customer who got some Facebook funding. It wasn't a lot, you know, it's not like they're overnight millionaires. They came to us and said, we want to put our wedding application on Facebook together. And again, the time frame was about 30 days. I don't know what this is without 30 days, but you know, I guess they don't think I need a vacation. The point is they said, this is how much money we can do it for, this is how long we have. The only way to meet that criteria was to use open source. Had to. They couldn't, if they'd have bought a proprietary solution, their Facebook fund would be used in paying the licensing costs. So instead, they took our solution and created a services engagement. One of our SI partners, Rivet Logic, deployed this. Put our Ingres database out. We started from our Appliance install. Ingres database, we used the JBoss application server and Alfresco on top of that. Now, when I first got to hearing this, I thought, come on, Facebook, is this really enterprise class? I mean, my son has a Facebook page. How enterprise class can it be? 300,000 users on Facebook now, or 300 million users on Facebook now. That's pretty enterprise class. And within a month of this deployment, they had 25,000 users sign up for that application. I don't care what numbers you're looking at, that's enterprise class to me. 25,000 users on that application. And it was a success, and we'll do more and more customizations with them because they used open source software. And the key to it, they didn't have to make a big cash layout for licensing. They spent it in services to make sure it was deployed and successful. And this was so successful for us that we're actually going to push this out into the cloud as well. So that if you're developing Facebook apps, you'll be able to buy this platform on a month-to-month repeating basis in the cloud. Just to summarize, commodity pricing, services engagements. People are now starting to spend a little more money in IT, but they're having those hard conversations. You know, do I really need to do my email in-house? Email is a touchy one. It really is touchy because they think, well, you know, it's corporate data. It can't live out in the cloud. I don't know. There's some companies that are doing it really, really well that can make that happen. And then they're looking at those new projects. Yes, comment.
So I have a specific question about that. What's your argument for that? Because I hear there's a lot of concern around that. What's the...
Yeah. I think it comes down to, well, actually, do you mind just holding that, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Yeah, just remind me. See, I'm a DBA. I can only think of one thing at a time, right? So let me, yeah, I'm an asynchronous DBA. That's right. The big thing is the total cost of ownership. You know, you have to have those hard conversations. The good news is that people are looking now for open source alternatives when they start doing that total cost of ownership. They're willing to call up. In fact, you know, a major mobile telephone manufacturer that we've been trying to work with. 2 years ago, we had one meeting with some lowly VP out in nowhere, California. Man, this year, phone has been ringing off the hook with the VP of so-and-so looking for a way to roll out open source products across their enterprise. So now is the time to be in the open source business, to make money. And I know we kind of say, oh, I do it because I love to program. Hey, I'm a greedy American capitalist. I do it because I want to make money, so I have more time to program, so I have more time to do that kind of stuff. There's nothing wrong with being an open source person who gets paid. You know, maybe they're going to escort me from the building for saying that, but you know, there's nothing wrong with collecting a paycheck for your hard work. Okay, so in conclusion, this is my contact info. I love to fish too, by the way. In fact, my brothers are all these husky contractor types, and they mock me because I work behind a desk, and every time we go out, I just slay them. I just kill. Oh, watch it. Excuse me, sir, could you leave? So that's my info. If you want to just talk fishing, you want to talk open source, you want to talk Ingres, appliances, man, again, if there's one thing you take away from my presentation, appliances. Your stuff, your solutions got to work together. Okay? Questions, comments? Back to our, I'm going to leave that up. So you're talking about what's the answer to corporate data in email, sensitive private data. Yeah, great question. Couple of ways to approach it. Number one is, how do what type of email is the corporate sensitive? Is it corporate sensitive in the legal department? Is that really what your concern is? Is it the legal department, HR department, some of those internal things? First, understand what you're talking about, corporate sensitive. Second, help them realize that even though it's on your side of the firewall, what is what's your firewall strength at? Are you really saying that yours is going to be better than somebody else who does it for a living? And if so, great, that's fine. But really, are you saying that you have the latest patches and you're current on all your patches and all your IP tables and everything are correct? Yes or no? And have that conversation. And if the next part of that is, well, can we do a subdomain? We've got something outside the firewall that handles most of the traffic, and then we have a subdomain that lives inside the firewall that handles that sensitive email. Again, I have a hard time thinking that you can do that cheaper in-house than somebody can do it out in the cloud. I want to have that debate with you, but that's just my thinking. Other questions, comments? Fishing? Fishing question, right? No, go ahead. Say again, can I describe the cloud offering for Ingres? Yeah, great question. EC2 or EC3, Enterprise, what do they call it? Enterprise Cloud for Amazon, I think. Yeah, that's what we're going for. We haven't announced pricing. We haven't done any of that yet. We're still in the can it technologically be done? And if so, how do you sell it? How do you license it? The challenge with moving things out in the cloud is it's a whole new marketing structure, right? You're spending money on how much you have in RAM and how many bytes of data move across the network. And so, yeah, it's a new business. I don't have a firm answer for you right now. But I will say this, Forrester just put out a new analysis of cloud computing and virtualized computing. It's growing 122% per year, year-over-year growth. It is, you need to have a cloud offering. I'm just telling you, Tyler McGraw with the fish and the bad hat says, go get a cloud offering. Saw a question over here. Anybody else? Okay, in conclusion, let me just finish up. So, fast forward to my latest DBA assignment. And how much time do I have? I'm done? Oh, a book. Right, let's give a book away. Okay, Ubuntu on a Dime. Am I saying that right? Ubuntu? Ubuntu? Okay, if you can tell me what is written on page 153. Okay, maybe not. Let's see. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and... What did you say? Dang it. The gentleman who asked me the email question, are you interested in an Ubuntu book? The guy who did the data center relocation. Here you go. Oh, yeah. You're probably one of those slacker sysadmin guys. Yeah. Sir, you had a question. Thank you. What's your name? Jared Kent? Okay, make sure you pay $5.95 outside for taxes on that. Sorry, your question again was legal indemnification kind of thing? Yeah, great question. So far, it hasn't been a deal breaker for me. I haven't had anybody turn me down for open source over legal concern. Yet. I'm sure I may. In fact, it's funny you say that because one of my first assignments was with SEO. So SCO Unix was where I kind of cut my teeth there too. Anyway, I had my story. Any other questions? All right, so my story, last DBA assignment I was up in Canada with a company that makes malt. They don't make beer, they just make the malt, right? And so I was working on their Ingres databases, and it just wasn't going good. You know, you have I don't know if you guys have been on those assignments where everything that goes wrong is going to go wrong, and the data purge I was running for hours. You know, it just took longer and longer. And so I recollected to my first DBA assignment about if there's a button, push it. So just randomly, I thought this isn't going well. I walked over and pushed the reset button, and that fixed everything. It booted up, and everything was great, and it was wonderful. So push the button. If there's a button to push it. Again, my name's Tyler McGraw with Ingres Corporation, and I thank you for your time.